Hey everyone! Since we're switching mediums again this week and watching a film, I'd like to start by offering some pointers on how to analyze films. As we've seen, poetry and short fiction have some unique rules, as does the graphic novel, and film is no exception. When we get to doing drama, we'll develop our toolbox further. In many ways, analyzing a film is just like analyzing a story or another work of literature, and we can use some of the same techniques to do so. While we have added a visual element to our analysis with Dark Knight Returns, now we are adding an audio-visual element to our medium, that is, sound and moving pictures. But as we saw with The Dark Knight Returns, we are still able to analyze the work in terms of character, plot, themes, settings, imagery, and symbolism. The tools for literary analysis are flexible and applicable to these other mediums. Some new possibilities, though, in film include analyzing musical choices, props, costumes, camera angles and shots, coloring, and other features. As you may notice when you watch Birdman, director Alejandro G. Iñárritu uses long shots throughout the film, so much so that much of the film appears to have been shot from a single camera in a single shot. Throughout this method, Iñárritu creates pace and pattern, and when that pattern breaks, it matters. The analogy here with Dark Knight Returns is that Miller uses the 16-panel page mentioned in an earlier presentation to create an expectation in the reader. Again, when that pattern breaks, we, as an audience, are cued in to a key moment. We must consider the moment as an artistic choice. Why does the director do it? And what is the effect or impact of such a change? Let's dig into some of the themes in Birdman now. One central idea in this film is the idea of the tension between art and reality, and the idea of truth. One might categorize Birdman as existing in the genre of meta-cinema, or cinema that comments on itself as an art form. This is because a key idea played with here is the question of when art begins and reality ends. When are these actors acting? Obviously, they are acting out the film, but this film puts them on stage and acting in a completely different mode. Within that mode, we see characters and actors move between the roles they are playing in front of a crowd in a play and the roles as characters in the film. And we're left with a sense that we can never be sure when they're acting or not, even though we know that they're always acting. This is a film, after all. To add to that, we also get Regan and Mike play the role of director and writer at times, commenting on one another's work. Notice, if you will, in the first scene of the film, that in Regan's mirror is a quotation that states, quote, "A thing is a thing, not what is said of that thing," unquote. Well, aside from referring to a discussion Regan will have later with the film critic Tabitha Dickinson, this quotation speaks of the film itself. Birdman seems interested in both being and saying. It's about living a life of artistry and living through art, while itself also being a work of art. Ed Norton's performance as Mike Shiner / Nick provides a fruitful place to analyze in terms of meta-cinema. He is called Mr. Truth. He is contrasted with Ralph, the original Nick in Regan's production. The first lines Regan, and not Birdman, utters are, quote, "I'd be a lot better if I could get Ralph to stop acting," unquote. And indeed he does. And he's replaced by Shiner, who instinctively knows all the lines of the play, who insists on drinking real gin on stage, who tells Sam, quote, "The truth is always interesting," unquote. But who also, in the real world, he is told, is a fraud. Shiner admits this himself in his second rooftop conversation with Sam. He says, quote, "I don't pretend out there," meaning on stage. "I pretend just about every place else, but not out there," unquote. One other moment that emphasizes this. Regan's on a rooftop, looking like he's going to jump, and a stranger yells, quote, "Is this for real or are you shooting a film?" unquote. After Regan replies that it's a film, even though we as viewers can't be sure, he does seem on the brink. The voice yells back, quote, "You people are full of shit," unquote. Another theme played on here that resonates with something that is emphasized throughout this whole course so far is the idea of how our past defines us. An interesting real-life analogy to the struggles of Regan Thompson comes from the life of the actor who plays him, Michael Keaton. This is another portal between art and reality that we're asked to consider. Keaton, here performing in what might be called an art film later in his career, suffered from his own inability to break free from the role he played as Batman in the early 90s in both Tim Burton's 1989 film Batman and its 1992 sequel, Batman Returns. Regan fights openly with his past, depicted visually by the Birdman 3 poster hanging on his dressing room wall. Our first scene features this image openly, and it appears in important ways as it gets progressively more destroyed throughout the film's first half. Taking a look at the film's first scene will reveal a shot at around 3 minutes and 15 seconds where Regan's face appears directly next to Birdman's face in a poster, both framed by a mirror. As the camera turns out of the mirror and into the real room, Regan's face is pictured directly in front of the Birdman 3 poster, blocking it out completely. And indeed, just as Bruce Wayne cannot block out Batman in Book 1 of The Dark Knight Returns, Regan cannot block out Birdman. Birdman's is the first voice we hear, and it's constantly in Regan's ear. It might be said that in the film's final scene, he fully embodies that persona. One idea that I'd like you to think about is the relationship between commercial art and fine art explored in this film. The struggle between Shiner and Regan has a lot to do with Regan's past as an action star, the past he's trying to move beyond and into the realm of real artistry. Shiner says that, quote, popularity is the slutty little cousin of prestige, unquote, and goes on to call superhero movies, quote, cultural genocide, unquote. These criticisms hit home for Regan, because presumably the only reason he would do what he's doing is that his ego wants prestige and that he wants his legacy to be more than that of an action star. I'm reminded of a passage from a David Foster Wallace article on filmmaker David Lynch that goes as follows, quote, you could say that a commercial movie doesn't try to wake people up, but rather make their sleep so comfortable and their dreams so pleasant that they will fork over money to experience it. The fantasy for money transaction is a commercial movie's basic point. An art film's point is usually more intellectual or aesthetic, and you usually have to do some interpretive work to get it, so that when you pay to see an art film, you're actually paying to work, unquote. Maybe some of you felt this way while watching Birdman, I don't know. Arguably, Birdman, though, is trying to be a commercial film and an art film. It's a superhero franchise and the prestigious Raymond Carver in direct competition within the film. And it asks important questions about what art is and what it should do. Is it to entertain us, in other words, to make our sleep comfortable? Or is it to wake us up to some aspect of life or reality that we previously hadn't considered? This point is related to a sub-theme that pervades this film as well. Unlike Broadway plays that rely heavily on reviews, superhero movies often get bad reviews, but still enjoy huge audiences. Birdman makes this point directly into Regan's ear. The critic has no power in the superhero film genre, but on Broadway, Tabitha Dickinson rules. And this matters, because Regan makes the point that he is risking everything to put on this play. He spent the fortune that he made in commercial film to put it on. He literally shoots himself on stage for his art, and perhaps he does it all ultimately for that good review, which he gets. Art, I suppose this suggests, real art, is sacrifice. The artist puts herself on the line every time she presents her work to the public and risks a kind of suicide. Some other quick ideas to consider include the way this film may be considered an adaptation of what we talk about when we talk about love, and related, the development of the nuclear family unit, and the various love affairs playing out on and off stage in this play. Another tack to consider is the tension between the ego of the creative artist and the puniness of the human condition. For this one, think of Sam's toilet paper roll and the idea of remaining vital and fresh as one ages. And furthermore, the allusion to Macbeth's tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow speech, which emphasizes Sam's point that the last toilet paper piece is to make a point about what, quote, all our ego and self-obsession are worth, unquote. Isn't it fascinating that Reagan wipes his face with it? There's so much more to delve into in this brilliant film, but I'll leave that to your discussion, which I encourage you to invest some time and energy into. Until next time, goodbye.